Hi everyone. After reading the Racial Identity Development Theory from Module 2, it helped examine my identity development by breaking it up into general stages. And I felt like Poston's biracial development theory was pretty applicable to me overall. Largely what influenced this for me was my family upbringing and then community, like my neighborhood and school. When I was very young, my parents moved from South Tucson to Southwest. That was still Mexican, but more of a middle-class, whiter area. And that definitely altered my development. And then the earliest I can remember making these distinctions was probably around preschool or kindergarten, and it was manifested mostly just on racial skin color. As I got into middle childhood, adolescence is when I really started to understand being biracial, and also started to deal with those later stages of his theory. I was Mexican, but like not Mexican enough is what I felt. I didn't speak fluent Spanish. I didn't know all our cultural traditions, and I appeared whiter than my peers, which would take you through the categorization or the choice of group categorization, guilt and confusion, and then the denial stage, and then finally appreciation and integration of both identities. I don't feel like I've experienced institutionalized racism, thankfully. And I think because of where I lived, that moving, to a middle-class white area kind of shielded me from that mostly. But I did recently interview a 7-year-old child in middle childhood, living on the east side of town. And they live in an area with a much lower child opportunity index than where I grew up. And it really illuminated my awareness of racial disparities. Like me, the child was also Mexican American, but this area, was less safe. The neighborhood, no nearby parks, crosswalks, lower quality schools, a greater concentration of single parent households, which are mostly held by mothers. And according to Kolovoski's 2014 article on critical race theory, opportunities for application in social work, practice and policy, being white is essentially the ultimate property that comes with social, cultural, and economic privileges. So the single mother households like his, she has to work more than 40 hours a week between a full and part-time job, and she's a victim of intersectionality with sexist and racist pay wages that are less than her white male counterparts. So, the places she could afford were much more limited than the worst parts of town. And this also equates to a higher dependence on health insurance via the ACA or food stamps, for example. Another example, his father deals with schizophrenia, has mental illnesses, has had some run-ins with the law. There's a story, he was released on parole, but as a stipulation of it, couldn't have a car, so he relied on public transportation. The bus was late one day, for example, and he got late to one of his scheduled meetings with his parole officer, but it was enforced very punitively, and it wasn't accounted for that it was out of his control. And if it was the same situation with a white parolee, that might be very different, and there might be an extended leniency based on the situation. So I think these conditions, these circumstances really reflect the systemic inequalities in housing, education, economic opportunity that disproportionately affect communities of biracial and people of color. For his parents, they're in their 40s, so they're in middle adulthood. For Erickson's stages of development, that would equate to generativity versus stagnation. So when individuals can't find ways to contribute meaningfully to the families, communities, they would risk falling into that stagnation. And these external forces, in the macro system, are helping create those barriers for his parents. His mother, who was, like I said, a victim of intersectionality and systemic racism, despite her tireless efforts, her economic mobility kind of remains limited. It's capstone. She can't really afford to move her family to an area with better schools or resources, and this can lead to frustration, fatigue, and that stagnation, because her hard work's not really, there's no outcome to it. It's all stagnated, it's all the same. on the flip side, the generativity of it is she's not giving up. She's being persistent and trying to uplift her family from an unequal system. The father, likewise, is experienced institutionalized racism, living with that schizophrenia, having that mental health stigma, and then the racial discrimination, being Mexican American in the criminal justice system, moving through that. I think that punitive treatment undermines his ability to fulfill his generative role as a father and as a provider, and that can foster feelings of isolation, hopelessness, stagnation. Applying critical race theory to this, like a way we can, what can we do? As social workers, it's our responsibility to promote social justice. One action that I can take is to challenge this power structure that perpetuates this racial inequality and inequity. Advocating at like a local school or a city council board meeting to voice funding and staffing inequities in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, schools, and then highlighting discriminatory policies like employment practices that promote that inequity for his mother, or expanding mental health reform for the criminal justice system. And Kolovolsky's article from 2014 also emphasizes using counter storytelling by sharing the parents, their lived experiences through these community forums, through these local advocacy groups, grassroots organizations, or these policy testimonies, so that they can humanize these issues and expose how racial and intersectional inequities function in everyday life.